anyone who's working in music marketing needs to understand this one. And that is that repetition is okay. And in fact, it's optimal. Repeating your content is so important.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 324. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy, and with me, as always, is Circa. Cirque, I think this is going to be a cool episode, man. We've been at this for a while. We're coming up on an anniversary. What year is this?
Yeah, we started in 2017, so we're now on our 8th year.
Wow, it's crazy. 8 years. That's wild. I say that to say we've been doing this music marketing thing for a while, and I think we've picked up a thing or two here and there. And on this episode today, we wanted to talk about a few lessons that we've learned and some of the ones that we wish we might have known sooner so that you don't have to take a long time to learn them. Hope you can pick up the lessons that we're going to share on this episode and think about them in the context of your music career and how they might affect what you're doing from a marketing perspective to grow your audience, monetize your audience, and build a music career that you're really excited about and can take you places that you never thought you would go. So I'm excited.
Hell yeah. Let's do it.
This first one is an interesting one that I think a lot of artists struggle with, and I wish that I had just accepted sooner. This was more of like an acceptance type of lesson than a learning one. And sometimes it really is just about the song. And we're not that great at picking the best music to represent us online or to go to market with.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think that I've been guilty of this with my project with, sometimes you know what a hit is. Sometimes it's not so obvious.
Sometimes you want to ignore the hit and act like it's not a hit.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Like, for instance, we knew that our song Pickup was going to be a hit when we were creating it. I wrote a song that involved less participation from my group, members. It was like, I wrote it, I kind of helped produce it, and I sang it. And I didn't think it was like a hit necessarily. I just thought it was a really well-written song. It came out, it didn't get much love. But when I finally made a piece of content for it, that content just started snowballing. And then it rivaled our song Pickup, which we knew was a hit. So in terms of results. So
super interesting. And I think this is true around marketing across the board. Here's an example I can share. Years ago, I was actually doing marketing there was like a retirement community nursing home. And when it came to picking the offer that we went out to market with to try and get people's attention and get leads, so people signing up for more information and contacting this place, we were like, oh, well, like certainly families that have senior citizens that might need to go into a retirement center, nursing home type setup, they're going to want to have a consultation. So we ran with a free consultation offer. No leads, or very few. When we pivoted to a guide on how to find and look for and vet retirement centers in your area, all of a sudden they were flooded with leads. It's a really nice corollary between any kind of business and music, where it's like good song, great song versus song you really love, but might not be the one to expose your audiences to first and foremost.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. The current, at least what we consider current best practices for digital marketing for businesses, and to a degree that is filtered through to artists as well, is it's ideal if all of your front end, top of funnel marketing is going towards a single product. Meaning, if you're running ads to cold audiences, people who don't know who you are, and you're offering a product, it should be the product that most reliably converts people who don't know who you are into customers. It should not be the product that best introduces them to your brand. It should not be the product that, you think really exemplifies what your products are like. It should be the one that's most successful in getting them in the door. And this is the exact same thing, right? Your songs are like products, and it doesn't matter if your favorite is this one, or if you think the one that's best constructed is this one, or if you think the one that best represents the other music you have is this one.
Ooh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you're looking for opportunities to get them to continue to listen to more stuff and then later on become customers and longtime fans. And you're going to maximize those at bats that you have if you choose the one that's optimized for this most reliably gets the most people to listen and at least stream and maybe add it to their playlist or check it out.
Put simply, you should lead with what's accessible to new audiences.
Yeah.
Now, that's a hard pill to swallow, but I think it's an important lesson that every artist needs to learn.
100%.
Number 2, this was a fun one for us to learn at the agency, and that is the power of name recognition and brand when it comes to making offers and selling to audiences, both warm and cold. And it's funny that this was even a reality, but it came to be real for us when we were working with an artist that was a newer artist, but he had a whole bunch of ties to a bunch of legacy artists and super famous people on a record that they were putting out together. It was like a collaboration type record. And we were able to drive. There's actually a case study podcast episode that we did on this record. We'll link to it in the show notes. This was a few years ago now. But this was kind of a turning point for us at the agency to see what we could do when it came to selling music products to cold traffic as a result of name recognition. And it really allowed us to tap into the power of that for the types of artists that we work with at the agency. And so that was really cool. And I think like a pivotal lesson for me when it came to music marketing. So I say that to say, if you're an artist that has, let's say you're not, a super, household name type artist, totally get it 100%. If you ever have collaborations that you're doing with people that are bigger than you or that have larger audiences than you, leverage those collaborations and those names as much as you can. That's important. That's why it's helpful. I think a lot of artists miss the mark when they're doing collabs, or maybe they have like a guest feature on a song, but then they don't lean into it. Like they're like, oh, we got the feature, sweet. Like we're not going to do anything more with it. It's there. That should be enough. No, lean into it. Use it in your marketing.
Yeah. And we should probably provide some nuance to that case where this artist had never released before under their moniker. So they had never sold any records, but they had a laundry list of like the top neo soul players and performers on the credits for this, 3 songs record. And that was a huge bet, right? They had to leverage all of their connections because they were a player for a lot of these bigger artists in a lot of sessions. So they had good relationships. They leveraged that, probably paid some amounts, non-zero amounts, and then printed a crap ton of vinyl. And they took this huge swing. It worked out, right? So it's hard to really tell why it worked out. And the reason I'm telling you that is because it's going to be different for your use case. If you've got one big feature on a record and you're going to leverage that to promote that record, that's going to be helpful to a non-zero degree. But the reason it worked out so well for this artist is because it created this air of mystery where it's like, who is this guy we don't know who has so many people that we do know on the record? And they won't talk about who they are, and they won't do any press. Like it all culminated in this big newsworthy event. And in our last episode, we talked about newsworthiness. And so this hits that on the head, right? It's like it's the novelty element of newsworthiness. It's odd that this artist had so many, and then prominent figures on their record, and we don't know who they are. So I wouldn't expect their result where like they went from selling 0 records ever to doing $250,000 worth of records in like 3 to 4 weeks. So that's probably not going to happen unless you create the same exact circumstances. But that doesn't mean that leveraging the name recognition of a big feature isn't a great idea in your marketing.
100%. Yeah. I think that's really helpful context to apply for sure. Speaking of context, this is an interesting one. Going back to like early days when you and I first met, I wish that I knew the place for music videos in music marketing, period, and how 9 out of 10 times narrative loses to performance videos. And to the universe's credit for bringing us together, Cirque, I learned this one from you.
We should unpack that, right? Because music videos in the 90s were a great way to get attention because the only way to interact with an artist visually was to watch their music video either through like a VHS that they released or through MTV or VH1. There wasn't a whole lot of looking at videos on the internet, right? So the music video as a creative type benefited from that environment. And then as we got just more and more bandwidth, better video compression to where they eventually met up to where you could put as many videos as you wanted on the internet. That really changed things. So you can get any type of video. And so we started to tend towards stuff that was more casual, more candid, stuff that sort of mirrored our real life more. So instead of a music video that's this big produced thing, which doesn't really fit with our real life experience, the tendency, trended towards man on the street, right? You encounter a man on the street. He's a busker. He's doing something remarkable and talented. And that's a lot more exciting than this big production music video. And so that became the best way to get people's attention. And now music videos are a lot better and maybe not the most optimal way to create branding, right? Where now someone knows about you, that you've got their attention. How do we brand, or how do we condition their understanding of you as an artist and how they feel about you with a piece of media? So a music video can do that. A music video can, for someone who's already interested, sort of give them a template of understanding or visual language for you as an artist. And that impacts how they think about you, how they talk about you to other people, and what they expect from you. It's a branding thing.
Exactly.
It's an expensive one too.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly it. Where the split happens is that performance style content, type of content that you would see on social media, these types of videos are great for attracting attention to yourself as an artist. And music videos, like you said, Cirque, amazing for building brand and solidifying what it means for someone to associate certain things with you as an artist. Those are great for capturing attention that you already have and keeping fans and conditioning them towards going deeper with you. And that's where they fit into the kind of the whole music marketing landscape. Something really interesting while you were talking about the history of music videos and how the internet played a role in that. I've never thought about it this way before, but I can actually think of a pivotal sort of shift in my own consumption of music content. I remember on LimeWire downloading music videos of my favorite bands, but then I remember downloading live content of my favorite bands and probably doing that more than I was downloading the music videos, because there was a limited number of those, but how much live content was out there, pro shot or not, I was like ravenous for it at a certain point, especially as in my preteen years, pre-YouTube. I spent a lot of time doing that. In fact, if I went back to my parents' house, I probably have burned DVDs filled with file folders of live performance content that I downloaded from file sharing websites and Pirate Bay and LimeWire and whatnot. And it's interesting that shift happened like that. I've never thought about that before. That's really interesting. Super cool. This next one is current for me, actually. It's something that we're seeing a lot of at the agency with clients that we work with. And it's something that we're spending a lot of time talking with artists about. And I think it's a bit controversial and it's still being worked out and talked through. But it's this lesson that I think we're learning, that large TikTok audiences that are coming from viral content, those big audiences do not equal easy sales, audiences that can be easily sold to, like we've historically seen from long form content or multi-channel large audiences from things like name recognition. And I think this comes with TikTok audiences and TikTok in general, short form content being newer territory. But these fans seem to be a bit cooler, meaning colder, not as ready to buy. So the lesson that I'm taking away from this and that I'm talking with a lot of artists about is, don't wait to build up some kind of massive critical amount of fans, as much as I might have suggested you would multi-channel or in the past on other platforms. Start looking to monetize people when they're warmest on TikTok, when you can. I think that that's an important lesson. And like I said, it's still evolving and I'm still kind of experimenting with it. We're kind of experimenting with it at the agency, but it's definitely something that we're seeing that these short form, especially on TikTok audiences, are harder to sell to in ways that wouldn't quite happen on Instagram, Facebook, and other platforms.
Well, it might not be a condition of like these people are different. It might be a condition of TikTok virality is a mile wide and an inch deep. You're going to get a much larger exposure footprint, meaning more people are exposed, but that exposure doesn't necessarily equate to rich depth in terms of like how deep do they go into finding out about you, right?
Exactly.
They see a piece of TikTok content. That doesn't mean they went and streamed everything you got on Spotify. It doesn't mean they went and checked out all your content on TikTok. It doesn't mean that they, signed up for your email list or went to your website or any of these other deeper actions. And so it's an infrastructure problem. And the 502s are a great case of this, where they got the large TikTok viral exposure footprint, but they had infrastructure in place that brings them deeper automatically. So if you went to the 502's website, you were invited to sign up for their album launch experience, which is like maximum depth. So if you just signed up for that, you would have been a lot deeper. Whereas most people who get TikTok virality, all of their infrastructure is geared towards that virality, to making it happen, not towards bringing, expose people deeper into their brand. And so I think the problem we're experiencing is that when we deal with people who have achieved that virality, they very often tend to not have the infrastructure to support pulling fans who get exposed to them through that viral moment deeper.
That's so true. It's a plumbing problem. And in addition to that, it's also, while there is blame to be placed on infrastructure that could have been built, there's also blame to be placed on limitations in TikTok itself. Retargeting audiences, for example, on organic TikTok isn't a thing right now. You can build retargeting audiences based on ads that you've run on TikTok. So, for example, you go organically viral on TikTok, can't build retargeting audiences. You run ads on a video on TikTok, thumbs up, you've got retargeting audiences. Guess what's often bigger, And so you have the limitations on infrastructure, even that you can't pull those people deeper in a way that, historically we would love to.
Yeah.
Speaking of content, this is another lesson that I think is really, really critically important for every artist, every manager, anyone who's working in music marketing needs to understand this one. And that is that repetition is okay. And in fact, it's optimal. Repeating your content is so important.
Yeah. A point I'd like to make about that. And this is just a cardinal rule that you can apply, because we could tell you all the different ways that typecase or like, what are we looking at? We're looking at content can be reused, right? So we say that to you, but there's other things that can be reused or repurposed for the same reason. So I'm going to give you the underlying reason. You bake it into your brain, and then anytime you encounter that, you'll know it's true, which is that most people won't see any individual thing that you try to get them to see. So if you put out a social media post with some content in it, the reason you can reuse it is because most people won't see it. So you still have tons of people out there who haven't seen it, and to them, it'll be new. If you release a song, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, 10 years ago, and you're worried about bringing it back up or promoting it or trying to create some content around it, but it's old, you can apply. Have most people seen this? Is it truly old? Well, no, most people won't see any individual thing. So I can reuse it. If you've got a sales promotion, right, that worked really good a year ago, but you're worried about rehashing it because you're afraid people will be like, didn't you try to sell me this last year? No, because most people won't see any individual thing. And there's different filtration mechanisms you can use to prevent people who have seen it from seeing it again, not on social media, but in the case of like a sales promo. But you should apply that in all cases. Should I reintroduce this thing that I previously introduced? Probably yes.
100%. And I think it's an easy concept to understand when you think about it in terms of a song, for example, right? Has everyone that I want to hear my song heard my song? No. that means I should continue to market my song. I think artists get tripped up when it comes to pieces of content that have done well for them. And they're like, well, because it's done well, that means everybody has seen it. Resist the urge to think that way and apply the same level of thinking that you apply when it comes to music that you release that hasn't been exposed to as many people as it should be. Apply that across the board. Sales promotions are another really great example. And I'll be honest with you guys about this specific instance. We have some clients at the agency when we run like calendar year sales promotions, we'll run the exact same. I'm going to be doing it this month, actually. There are a few clients this month that we're going to run the exact same Memorial Day offer that we ran last year because it did really well. And if they have new fans that either didn't take it or never saw it, they have existing previous fans that didn't bother with it. And frankly, they have fans that loved it so much last year that they'll probably do it again. And that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%. And just so you don't feel alone, this happens in business, right? Businesses, it manifests in a slightly different way, but it's very common for businesses to say, our ads aren't working because we have fatigued the entire total addressable market for our product. Everyone who could buy our product must have seen it because our ads aren't working. And that's a faulty premise because oftentimes, like in 99.99999% of cases, no, you haven't saturated your total addressable market. There's some other reason that your ads aren't working as well as they could. It's probably not that. Right. But like you can zip that all the way up to your use case, which is like, no, probably everyone who would like your song is not aware of it.
Yeah, super good. This next one is less about marketing and more about marketing processes. Maybe that perks your ears up a little bit. Sometimes it's not about your marketing, but it's actually a people problem. And what I mean by that is that despite anyone's good intentions that you might have on your team, maybe it's your drummer that thinks in marketing ideas that were cool in 2010, or your manager that has a certain way of viewing social media or how you should write your emails. Despite good intentions, people with opposing ideas or incorrect ideas about how you should market your music will take you off the rails when it comes to growth.
Yeah. And this is something we fight with a lot more at the agency than we do in sort of our coaching arm of the business or the Indie Pro membership. Because in the agency, we're dealing with people who have gotten to a certain point in their career. And the higher up you get in the music industry, or the more successful you are in music business, the more likely you are to have an ecosystem of people who help you run things, all with their own opinions, some of which are like terribly antiquated, or they don't have domain expertise here, but they're trying to prove their value to you to secure their position in your organization.
It's job security.
It's job security, right? So if they can infer that they have like domain expertise in this area where like you've actually hired a marketing agency because if they have domain expertise, then they're like more valuable to you. So we incur it a lot more in the agency than we do in other places, but it's also likely to happen when you know very little or when you're very just starting out, right? You're also likely to discount ideas because of some misguided notion that you have this rich, deep domain expertise about music marketing, despite not really having done it much. You assume you know how this should go because you've seen examples or you've seen some other people talking about it, and you figured like that's as deep as this gets. And so I can now discount all these other ideas. And so you should definitely try. And I've been working in music marketing for like over a decade, and I've worked with like thousands of cases. And the further along I go, the more I have to try to practice this modality of I really know nothing and I have to approach everything with fresh eyes.
Yeah. To add to this, I think every person that has ever been in a band knows what it feels like to be carrying all the weight and be dragging someone or many people along with you while you try to shoulder all of the responsibilities. I think most people that have been in bands or groups have felt that way. And that's another example of this is there are people that will look for job security. And so their opinions will weigh heavily on your marketing processes. And then there will people who are just going to try and be along for the ride. And that can also hinder you. It makes it really hard to get stuff done when you're, carrying all the weight and dragging people around. Not to get into the politics of running a band, but I've certainly felt that way before. And those two modalities of like job security and carrying someone along with you kind of came together in my mind in this lesson over years of doing this and helping artists with music marketing. So if you feel that's you, then know that you're not alone. It is a real thing that's that's out there and everybody deals with it.
Yeah, in all cases, when you're getting advice from external sources, consider their relevant experience in the domain they're advising you in the specific subdomain they're advising you in. For instance, if I give you advice about merchandise, printing it, inventorying it, 3PL, like I know enough to be dangerous in those fields. But if then you're talking to the founder of Downright Merch and he says something different than I do, go with him. He runs a merch company in the music industry. I'm a music marketer who sometimes deals with merch, in relation to my music marketing. He has more domain expertise. Listen to him.
Spot on. Shout out to Seamus from Downright Merch. We'll link to his episode that we did a few months back in the show notes. It's a good one. Definitely worth re-listening to if you haven't. I think that all of that is really well said, Cirque. This is an interesting one that you brought up that I'm excited to talk through is the vulnerability of music.
Yeah, I will say this, right? Like there is a saying in the music industry that music is a recession-proof business. It's old, so maybe it just hasn't been updated for current standards, but music, yes, it's recession-proof in the sense that it often doesn't behave differently during a recession than it does in good times. But that doesn't mean that it's like a rock solid business type that has no major vulnerabilities. And certainly the biggest vulnerability to music is that it is easy to turn music, like a song or just like music in general, right? An album, a song, a collection, a catalog, every song ever created is one of the first things made into a digital content type. Documents, and thereby like journalistic articles, books, everything that could be a document was kind of the first thing to be digitized in terms of content types. Music was like soon after. It was like the second thing. And so Peter Diamandis, who's like a future technologist and an investor and a super cool guy to listen to about future technology, proposes that there's these 5 or 6 Ds of exponential technology. One is digitization. So music was digitized. Then it is dematerialized. So music went from CDs to like, it's in the friggin' air. Like as long as I have an internet connection, I can go grab an infinite stream of music. So it's completely dematerialized. And then it's demonetized, meaning it becomes a commodity. Its price goes to zero over time. And so music is a highly vulnerable business because it is on a constant path of demonetization. And you have to change the business, how you think of it as a business in order to avoid that. You need to think about the music itself is going to only increasingly be more difficult to place a monetary value behind. I have to seek other ways to monetize than just I have a song, come buy it.
Yeah, that's true. The idea of music being recession proof is kind of a misnomer of what recession proof actually means because the foundation of music is trending towards down. It's trending
towards down.
Yeah, it's trending towards down. It's trending down bad. That's not what recession proof is. Its foundation is eroding.
It's pretty easy math because if I wanted to get every song that was ever created that is publicly available to buy in the 90s, it would cost me nearly infinite money. Okay. Let's say I wanted to just access it for a year. It's still the same amount of money. Now, if I want to access every song that's available to listen to publicly right now, it's going to cost me like $6.99 per month or, something like 70 to 80 bucks per year. That's drastically different, right? That's the rate of demonetization in play.
There's not much to do about this lesson besides just like don't go around saying that music is recession proof and trying to assign value to your music personally in your day to day, in the way that you communicate with your fans, in the offers that you make.
Yeah.
Sell your music and don't be afraid to attach value to the products that you sell and make money off of them.
Before we move on from this one, it also changes how you think about selling materialized music. Okay. Because now we can rebuild the value around materialized music like CDs and vinyls and cassettes, not on the prospect of this is the only way to get access to the song files, which it definitely isn't anymore. We can build up that value around all the other elements of that thing as a product, right? So a vinyl is a product. It fits in your home. It's a conversation piece. It might be signed and it represents your relationship to that artist. It might display to others in your home what your tastes are and thereby communicate something about you.
There's status elements. If it's a limited variant, if it has a certain color, it's a status element again amongst the community of fans. There's a lot there.
Yes. So now we're excluding the value entirely of this is the only way to get, the right to listen to the songs. And we are now solely focused on that alternative value it presents. And thereby we don't enter into a situation where a customer is thinking, I can get access to the songs this really expensive way, or I can get it this free way. No, it's I can get all these other benefits from a physical record, and I can't get that anywhere else.
Exactly. That's super good. I didn't think we were going to have an action item to that lesson, and I'm glad we did. As we were talking through these lessons, I was like, I don't know if we'll have an action item to that one, but I'm glad we did. The next one is interesting because I think it has weight to it in terms of how we built Indepreneur and Indepreneur's mission when it comes to creating a middle class of artists and musicians. We can talk a little bit about like the Pareto distribution of success in music and what that means.
Yeah. So like for those of you who are unfamiliar, Pareto distribution just simply says that like some small percentage or some minority of all of the entries in a field will represent a majority of all of the output of that field. So for instance, a minority of authors create a majority of the books. A minority of the books represent a majority of the sales. A minority of the sales represent a majority of the profitable sales, right? So it occurs at most levels of analysis. So a minority of artists represent a majority of all the song or music consumption by fans. A minority of artists hold a majority of the fans. And what this equates to in terms of the process of growing a music career is that there is asymmetric difficulty in growing. It is easy for already large artists to grow, and it is insanely more difficult for smaller artists to grow. But there's also asymmetric upside in having grown. So once you have grown, you will enjoy a much higher sales rate than someone who hasn't grown yet, right? You will enjoy easier paths to profitability. You will enjoy easier pathways to making connections or seeking partnerships. What is it? The Matthew principle. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. To those who have everything, everything will be given.
Yep. Yeah, and it kind of contextualizes the journey of marketing for an artist, I think, a little bit here. As in, like, the benefits that you could reap on the other side of growth outweigh or can outweigh the challenges that you face in growing.
Yeah, it's the reason why you might continue despite the idea that when you're just starting out, it's almost impossible to succeed. It's like as close to impossible as it can get without being impossible. It's the reason why you might still select music as your vocation, as the way you make your money, even though it is insanely hard. Is that once you succeed, scaling will be relatively easy compared to other business types. Your profitability or your ability to generate income long term will be more secure than other business types. It's hard to say that it's one-to-one. So it's like right now you could enter some other field or you could be a professional full-time artist. Does that other field, like if we add together the downside of growing that business and the upside of having grown it, it might not equal the one that we have in the music industry. So it is an important point to say that like it's not the case necessarily that the music industry is equal once you adjust for this asymmetry. And that, you know, it might be the case that music businesses just are harder, full stop.
They're definitely hard, that's for sure.
The next one is another one of mine, which is, I think once you get above a certain baseline of quality of music, production value, songwriting, the talents of the artists involved, there's a certain baseline you got to be over in order to succeed and have any chance of success. Once you're over that baseline, it tends to be the case that the better the music is, the harder it is to grow. And better is sort of subjective, right? But if we try to make it as objective as we can, let's say that like proficiency in a musical talent field, complexity of the music, novelty of the songwriting, right? It tends to be that the most successful artists are not the most technically proficient artists, right?
Yeah, yep.
Taylor Swift is not the best female vocalist in the world. She's not the best. She's a great songwriter. She's probably in there in the upper echelon for songwriters, pop songwriters. But just technical proficiency, she's not the highest in a lot of fields that she occupies like the number one spot in. And so it tends to be the case that like the more technically proficient you are, the better your music is, and especially the better you think your music is, the harder it will be to grow because you're going to encounter natural second order consequences of that state of being. You know, if you think your music is like amazing, you are going to run the risk of mistaking it to be self-evident. Oh, if the second you listen to it, you're going to love it, right? I don't have to market. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's such an important one, I think, that artists, especially in their earlier stages of marketing, they need to break down that obstacle, that objection that might come up in their mind of like, well, if I just get the music out there, like I want it to speak for itself. How often do you hear that? It's like, no, that's not how it works. No.
I have an example, which is an indie. I won't name him, but he is such an amazing composer and songwriter, and his songs are so rich with like complex melodies and harmony, and the composition is top notch, and the songwriting is novel, and it's like he's such a style beast. So good. My wife and I love his music. We still listen to it to this day all the time. But he experienced a lot of difficulty in growing compared to other people in our community. And it was because he didn't share those proficiencies over to the marketing and promotion side. And people are simple. People are not educated enough or experienced enough to look at that music and say, this is complex in these ways. They don't have the language necessary to describe it or even recognize it. And so it was insanely difficult for this artist to grow because like they were that amazing. They were truly better at music than me, but I know more how to dumb it down, and I don't spend as much time on the music as they did, and I can afford to put more time into the marketing. So yeah.
That ties in nicely to the first lesson that we were talking about, which is sometimes it's the song, sometimes it's the music. You should be focused on marketing that which is accessible to people, and what is complex and proficient and deep and dense and sometimes really emotionally intricate isn't always what's accessible to new fans or an audience that's never heard of you before. Hell, sometimes it's not accessible to audiences that already love you. How many times does an artist put out a sophomore record that they're like, this is my best work ever? It's the sophomore slump, right? They put out a record that they're like, this is my best thing ever. And the fans that love them for what they did before are like, no, we don't get this. This doesn't make sense anymore. That's just an example of how it occurs, I think, throughout, or it can occur throughout many stages of an artist's career. It also ties in nicely to this last lesson that you had, which you kind of teased that a little bit in saying like marketing and growing your music career is far more difficult and time consuming than actually the creation process itself, especially if, like you said, Cirque, you take less time with it, you're comfortable dumbing it down, and you invest the time then into the marketing.
I've met far more artists who are remarkable at making music than I have met artists or music industry professionals who are remarkable at growing an artist's career. There's just more of them. and so that translates to, it's going to take more of your time, resources, and effort to grow your fan base and make music a full-time career than it will to actually create great music. And that's not what people expect when they come into, okay, I put all this work into making my music great. Now let's add a sub process of that is marketing. And it's like, no, it's possible that creating the music is a sub process of growing a music career, and marketing, it's just a larger sub process.
Yeah.
And people don't like to hear that. And certainly like you'll get people who say like, I just want to be an artist. I didn't want to spend all this time making a business and marketing it. And that is not, you're not alone in that if that's you, because there's this great book called The E-Myth that applies to all entrepreneurs. And in the book, they tell this story of a woman who's just really great at making pies. Her grandma taught her how to do it. She loves doing it. So she starts a business to make pies. And over time, she realizes that in order to make that business succeed, she actually has to stop making pies.
Yeah. I've never read the E-Myth, but I do know that parable.
Textbook tome for entrepreneurialism. E-Myth, definitely check it out. But just to say that, like, yeah, making pies isn't actually the hard part of that business. And being remarkable at making pies does not guarantee success in that business. So if you really want making pies to be your full-time income, you want it to provide outsized financial security, then you're probably going to have to take making pies down off of the pedestal.
That's good, man. That's so good. Some of these lessons, what I really enjoyed about going through these, and I hope you guys dug these and can apply them to what you're doing right now in your own music career. What was fun about this is like there were some lessons for me that were very early on learned lessons. There were some that are still, making their way into my brain and being talked about amongst our team and being worked out with the artists that we work with. And I would be really curious to see, in another 8 years, what lessons we're talking about in the future. These kind of episodes are always a lot of fun to do, but I hope they give you guys a bit of a shortcut, take down the learning curve a little bit to some of the things that we've kind of cemented into our brains and been like, okay, these are truths that at least for now we recognize to live by and to work through in day to day as we're trying to grow the careers of the artists that we work with and that are in our community, so that you can do the same.
Hell yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time on Creative Juice. Peace out. Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us. West Coast, feel me. Say what?